Coming up on the show, from dance trends to breaking news, TikTok's next moves come straight from the Oval Office. We're going to take a deep dive into President Trump's latest executive order. Also, tech's talent pipeline just hit a six-figure toll, and the ripple effects could stretch far beyond Silicon Valley. We're going to hear from one tech CEO who's backing the changes to the nation's H-1B visa program. And it's a silent condition touching millions of Georgians, and it's about to put the healthcare system to the test. We're going to examine things like arthritis, how it remains one of Georgia's biggest health burdens. We're going to talk about that coming up. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil. This is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and we look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in to share their take as well on today's top stories. We try to have just a little bit of fun as well. But let's get you started today with this. A verdict is expected possibly as early as today in the case against Julian Connolly. He is accused of firing shots that killed 8-year-old Sequoia Turner in 2020 during the protests and unrest following the police killing of Rashard Brooks. The defense argues that witnesses described the shooter as dressed in black, while prosecutors contend Connolly was captured on surveillance dressed in red and fired the fatal shots. Prosecutors leaned on video evidence and, as investigators certainly to contend that Connolly to fire the shots, while the defense pushes back on the testimony, casting doubt. As jurors debate the Connolly's fate, we're going to bring back in defense attorney Daryl Cohen, back in, my friend there. Good to see you on camera there. I'm looking at you instead of looking at the words there. Welcome back. Let's talk about this particular case right here. Take us through the jury today, right? They're going to be deliberating for a couple of hours. They deliberated a couple of hours yesterday, and now what are they going to be going through as far as the activity goes for today?
Tessa, you have to remember that jurors are just people, just like you and I, on-camera people, off-camera people, and so they all have a different view of life. And when they look at something, all 12 of them can be looking at exactly the same thing, and each one of them can describe it in a different way. So extrapolate that to the jury deliberation.
Dale, do you
was
expect
he wearing red? Was he wearing black? I don't know. But what you do have is you've got great evidence from the prosecution. What you do have, sadly, is a great victim. Anytime a child is injured or murdered, jurors open their collective eyes and ears and pay far more attention, because whoever did that to this child needs to be punished.
Yeah.
Now, the question becomes whether or not the Fulton County DA's office was able to prove beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that he is the person who murdered that poor child. And that's what the jury has to decide. And juries don't speak with unanimity. They all have their own opinion, and they have to go through the evidence and make sure that in their collective opinion, which becomes one, that this is the person who did it and therefore should be convicted.
Yeah, we've been following this case from the beginning and been following it very closely. Do you expect the verdict to come down today? Absolutely.
Jurors do not like to be deliberating on weekends. Oftentimes when I was in the DA's office, it was a Friday afternoon, a Friday evening, a jury went out to deliberate. The judge let them know they were going to be deliberating all weekend. And you know what? That was the charge that they needed, and they came to a verdict. And I suspect this jury will do the same.
Yeah, the state is putting a lot of weight on the surveillance video. We talked about that, and a muzzle flash analysis. How persuasive is this kind of evidence to a jury?
A jury loves this type of forensic evidence. It's not what I saw and the way I interpret it. It is what actually happened. And when you can see it up close and personal, it makes a great deal of difference, because you can't say, well, I thought he was wearing red, I thought he was wearing black, I thought he was here, I thought he was there, or she. The jury sees the evidence, and if there's a question in one or more of the jurors' minds, then they can show it again.
Yeah.
If the judge will allow. So I think juries put a tremendous amount of credibility and weight on real evidence, not evidence that can be not tampered with, but can be looked at from a different angle.
Yeah. How do you evaluate the defense's decision to call just one witness, and that being an activist? Is this a gamble or a smart strategy here?
If he is acquitted, it's a very smart strategy. If he's convicted, it's a dumb strategy. Now, the reality is the defense has only so much they can do, and they have to represent their client in the way that they believe is best for the client. Frankly, had it been me, and it wasn't obviously, I would try to have worked out a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter. But you can't make people do what you want them to do.
Yeah. If the jurors are split between a strong circumstantial evidence or a shaky eyewitness testimony, which way do you think that usually leans?
Well, because here, the strong circumstantial, but it's really direct evidence. It's direct, we could see it. The jury's going to lean, in my view, toward the real evidence. And that's what they should do. Because, again, eyewitnesses are what they are. They're real people that have problems and see something the way they want to see it or the way they believe they see it. I think they're telling the truth, but I'll take the real evidence.
All right, Darryl, I'm going to actually put your forecasting hat on, and how do you see this playing out?
I see this as a conviction, and if I'm wrong, it'll be the first time I've been wrong in 5 minutes, but I see it as a conviction, and I see him having life in prison.
Okay.
We've got to stop this sort of thing. It's terrible what's going on in this country right now. We're bleeding every time somebody is killed, murdered, assassinated.
And I was going to ask you that. We got 30 seconds left here. What does this case ultimately say about the justice system in Fulton County and how it balances out with the community's pain and all the things that's going on around this?
Well, it says that the DA's office is doing what they should do. They're prosecuting cases that need to be prosecuted where someone was murdered, and they're doing the right thing. Now, the jury will do the right thing, regardless of whether they convict or acquit, but they're doing the right thing and they're doing the best they can do. I believe they will find him guilty.
All right. Darryl Cohen, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for your insight. And when a verdict comes in, of course, we're going to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Take care, Chesney. Have a great day.
Take care now. All right, folks, can't wait for the weekend, right? It's here, it's upon us, and we'll be drying out. That's the good news. We had the rain around yesterday, a couple thunderstorms in the forecast area, and now we'll see a few of those pop up a little bit later on this afternoon, isolated at best. 82 degrees will be the afternoon high temperature. That rain chance lowers as we head through the weekend. In fact, really drying out by Sunday, 84 for the high. There is some uncertainty to the forecast as we head into next week. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show, but temperatures will cool off a little bit next week as well. You're watching The Take, folks. We're back right after this. Welcome back to the show. A stunning turn in Washington. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on felony charges. The prosecutor who took over the case argued Comey lied to Congress and obstructed the state's investigation, accusations that strike at the heart of one of the nation's most powerful law enforcement institutions. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. And Alice, this is a rather unprecedented move here. Break down what the grand jury decided.
So this is unprecedented. This is the first time that a former FBI director has, in fact, been charged with a crime and now indicted by a felony grand jury. It's on charges of making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, and it is a major escalation against someone President Trump sees as a political enemy. So it all stems back to this testimony Comey gave in September 2020 before a Senate committee. And at that time, he was pressed over whether he lied to Congress years earlier about authorizing a leak to the media involving investigations into Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. He said at that time during the hearing that he stood by his previous testimony. There was a statute of limitations for trying to bring any charges accusing him of, in fact, lying in that testimony that was set to run out next week. And we've now seen President Trump speaking out publicly, saying that Attorney General Pam Bondi should take action. And now we have these, again, unprecedented charges. It was not entirely straight up, though, for the grand jury here. From what we understand, there was some division with the charging paper showing that jurors refused to indict Comey on one of the prosecution's proposed charges of lying to Congress.
Yeah, you mentioned the president. He was basically celebrating the news. It's been a rocky relationship ongoing with Trump back in his first term of office. Talk to us about that a little bit here.
Yeah, so there's known animosity that President Trump has had toward Comey dating back to his having approved the Russia investigation from the first Trump campaign. And President Trump has made clear many, many times that, he holds that against James Comey and that he thinks Comey is corrupt. And he had a lengthy social media post that he put out calling this justice in America, calling James Comey one of the worst people that America has ever known. And again, he has certainly weighed in publicly on his desire to have Comey prosecuted along with other perceived political opponents who have investigated him in the past in that social media post that was sort of an open letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi that was posted just this past Saturday. He was lamenting the pace of these investigations and really publicly urging that these people that he feels very strongly have wronged him in the past face prosecution.
Yeah. So Comey's now indicted, right? What's next for the former FBI director?
So he will have his first appearance in court. It's set for October 9th. That is just a little bit less than 2 weeks away. So that's his next moment to start pleading his case. He posted a video on Instagram overnight where he very clearly professed his innocence. He said, let's have a trial and let's keep the faith. And he said that he and his family have long understood that there could be a cost to standing up to President Trump. But he said he was not afraid and didn't want other Americans to be afraid. He said it was time to pay attention and that he looked forward to that trial. We've also now had a formal statement from his legal team saying that he denies the allegations in full and that they look forward to vindicating him in the courtroom.
All right, we'll be waiting to hear more on this. Alice Barr, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for the insight. Really appreciate it. All right, we're still waiting on who could possibly control TikTok. That's going to have an effect on what you'll see on the platform. We're going to have that discussion when we return. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Well, TikTok apparently isn't just for teenagers to make and watch short dance videos. A Pew Research Center survey finds a fifth of U.S. adults now get their news on a regular basis from TikTok. That's up only 3% from 2020. For young adults under 30 years of age, 43% turn to TikTok for news, and roughly a quarter of the people from 30 to 50 years of age say they mainly get their news from the platform. That's a growing reliance on TikTok. That comes as the president has signed an executive order reshaping who controls it. Here to examine what comes next for the app and its 170 million users here in the U.S. is Rome Chalapa. He's the University Emory Professor of Information Systems and Operations Management. Ram, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, how significant is this executive order in reshaping just, how TikTok, the way that U.S. regulators handle a foreign tech platform?
Well, it's actually a very interesting approach. I don't think we've seen this before. We have now had the government say that a few particular investors will be owners of TikTok, about 45%. And the Chinese investors and the Chinese government will own kind of the rest of it. So it's a very unique action that has been taken in order to kind of manage and take care of some of the issues with the platform.
Would you see it as a good thing or bad thing?
Well, I don't know whether anointing certain investors to manage is a good thing, but the idea that we need to have some semblance of an understanding of platforms that have essentially become news organizations, that in itself is not a bad thing.
Now, yeah, you mentioned that. The Pew study that we just read says 1 in 5 Americans now regularly get their news from TikTok. How does U.S. control of the platform potentially affect the type of news that users will see?
Well, I don't know if it is actually going to directly impact. The idea is that essentially the algorithm is now available and transparent on the US side of things. So if anything nefarious were to happen, like what the complaints we had during the previous election with sort of the Russian bots and so on, those kinds of components can at least be audited and brought to question. I don't think these investors are going to sit and rewrite the algorithms. All algorithms are focused on targeting the bubble. Essentially, they want to make sure that advertising dollars are maximized more than anything else.
All right, so you talk about advertising dollars. What about misinformation? Talk to me about that. Does tighter U.S. control kind of minimize that, or does it become just more politicized, do you think?
I don't think that really regulation can handle misinformation directly. I mean, by the time it's discovered what is considered misinformation, the definition of misinformation, all these are quite complex topics, and I don't think we can fix these things through these mechanisms.
All right, so let's talk about the younger audience then, right? How might the heavy reliance on TikTok for news impact some of these changes?
Well, I don't believe that the end users are going to see much of a difference. Where there might be implications, it might be to do with the fact that the data might be sitting inside the US. And this we can see with many other countries as well, is that even when multinationals operate and have data about the citizens of those countries, it is often required that the data is held in a data center within that particular nation. And so we might see some of that. So maybe the access to information and the storage of information, that might be contained within. But an average end user is not going to see much of a difference. And
I'm sure a lot of them hope they will not. All right. So, there's still some uncertainty whether or not, I guess, TikTok will stay here in America. Where do you fall on that line? Do you think that its days are numbered, or it'll be around?
I think they're going to strike a deal. That would be my guess. I don't think they would want to give up the market that we have, and there may be some middle ground as to what percentage and who will own it. I think that will still be discussed, but I'm pretty sure some deal will be struck.
Okay, Professor Chilapa, really thank you for your insight. Really appreciate it. A lot of people want to know about this. I'm sure we'll have you back on to talk more about it.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. President Trump making changes to the H-1B visa program. We're going to discuss its impacts when we return. The H-1B visa program is facing its biggest shakeup in years. Last week, President Trump signed off on changes to the program, the biggest being adding a $100,000 one-time fee to new applications, an enormous jump from the prior $2,000 to $5,000 scale. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are warning employees abroad to return quickly, facing confusion over the new rules. California is weighing a lawsuit saying the fee hike could cripple Silicon Valley access to global talent. Even so, the president expressed optimism after signing the order.
You're very close to the technology CEOs. Are they concerned about that?
I think they're going to be very happy. Everyone's going to be happy. And we're going to be able to keep people in our country that are going to be very productive people. And in many cases, these companies are going to pay a lot of money for that.
All right. Despite the president's Oval Office is praising it a little bit here, everyone in the tech world is just not on board with this. Time to bring in Harley Lippman. He is the CEO and founder of Genesis 10, one of the largest IT staffing firms in the U.S. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. You're backing this move. Tell us why.
For two reasons. I think, one, there are Americans who could do this work. And what President Trump is trying to do is to protect the American worker, and secondarily is to keep knowledge here in the United States. I think these are two big themes. What happens is American companies don't really engage in training much anymore. After the last Great Recession, training went out the window in corporate America among the Fortune 500. And I think that American companies need to embrace training once again, because American talent is here. So they went overseas for labor, but it really cost them more than they think. You know, sometimes they look at the labor rate, the dollar rate, and they say, oh, it's less than what they pay Americans, which presents other problems because they're undercutting American wages, which President Trump feels is unfair. But when you really add it up, when you consider the cost of the visa, the transportation from overseas countries, it ends up in the hidden costs, the indirect costs. These people often don't get hired, they go back home. That knowledge goes back home, you lose that knowledge, when more likely an American would stay here and you would retain that knowledge. You pay a bigger price in productivity and in cost than you may realize.
So you call this a need for correction, and you talk about the cost. So is that why you believe that $100,000 fee is ultimately good for the United States workforce?
Yes, because this will prevent people coming in and undercutting American wages. Now, if they spend $100,000, they're truly bringing in a very high quality, talented individual that is probably appropriate to work here in the United States. But too often they're bringing in low-skilled, entry-level Java developers or other skills in technology that Americans could have. And frankly, at the end of the day, the President of the United States was elected to protect Americans and to enhance the American way of life. And you can't do that better than helping them keep their jobs. You know, hundreds of thousands of Americans were fired from their job when work went offshore for cheaper labor. So this is a correction to that.
So what about those smaller companies, right? You think they can be able to adapt to the cost easier than some of these larger firms like Amazon and Microsoft?
They all have the same solution. There are companies like mine and many other good firms that train people out of college and do it very quickly. They put them in an intensive boot camp and they get these people up to speed really quickly. They're entry level, most of them. Some are more senior and you could upskill. But as boring as it sounds, it's not sexy, but training is the answer. And it keeps the knowledge here. The other reason is if you give work to people from foreign countries, invariably they go home at some point, most of them. And they've learned new ideas, startups are created, innovation is created in overseas countries. So who benefits from that? Not America. In fact, while America may be the leading technology country in the world, that edge is being eroded because of all the internet startups in countries all over the world. So to maintain our leading edge, which again falls under the leadership of the President of the United States, this will help maintain our technological leadership, which is very important for this country.
Harley Littman, really appreciate your insight on this. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, there's a lot of talk of new medicine, new medical treatment when it comes to autism. That's a big topic right there, folks. We're going to get the latest coming up. Plus, right after the break, we're going to be joined by Zach Merchant. He's going to give us a preview of the Georgia vote when we return. Don't go anywhere. Well, he made news last week announcing his run for governor. Now, Brad Raffensperger is sitting down with the 11Alive political team to explain his decision and what he hopes to do if he were to be elected next year. Joining us now, as he does every Friday, Zach Merchant, co-host of the award-winning show, The Georgia Vote. One day we'll get there, Zach. One day we'll get there. Congratulations to you, my friend.
Thank you, Chesley. You know, look, we are all award winners here.
You're a part of the team, right? Talk to us about this sit down.
Yeah, another big week in Georgia politics, right? We say it every week. I'm going to have to find some new ways to say it, but it's because we are in the middle of a really pretty momentous political moment in our state. Even though Election Day is still a long way away, we have this growing, it feels like almost by the day or by the week, growing field of candidates running for both governor and Senate. Brad Raffensperger, he's the latest to jump into this gubernatorial contest. He is a Republican. He's entering a Republican primary that's got at least two other major contenders in it. And he enters this race with, you know, if you're in Georgia or even around the country, you probably know Brad Raffensperger's name, so he's got high name recognition. But he also comes in with some baggage, at least in the eyes of some, at least in the past, Republican voters.
So where do things sit with the Republican primary right now?
Yeah, it's this really interesting sort of quickly changing, always evolving situation. So Raffensperger, we talk about his high name ID, right? That, of course, comes after the 2020 election, the controversy, the fallout of the presidential election here in Georgia. Raffensperger was a fierce defender of the validity of Georgia's election results. Chesley, you were here. You will remember that moment, as I think every Georgian will remember that moment. It was a flashpoint in our state's history. President Donald Trump, of course, was a very vocal, very public critic of the election results. He challenged the validity of the election results. There is another candidate in this gubernatorial primary on the Republican side who also questioned the validity of those results. That's current Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. At the time, he was a state senator. And so you've got this dynamic. And again, still very early in the primary race. We haven't seen these two candidates engage on this topic with each other, but I've asked both of them about it separately. You've got Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones running for the Republican nomination to be Georgia's next governor, who raised questions about the 2020 election results. You've got Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who is probably the state's most famous defender of those election results. And then you've got Attorney General Chris Carr, who's also in this race on the Republican side as well. You talk about Raffensperger, his history. Some state Republicans were really upset with him about his response to 2020. Delegates to the state GOP convention a few years ago, they voted to censure him. This year, they voted in what was a symbolic vote, but still the symbolism is there. They voted to try to ban him from qualifying as a Republican in future races. That really isn't going to work. He can run as a Republican. I asked him what he thought about all that and where he thinks he stands in the Republican Party right now. You can see his answer coming up this Sunday.
Yeah, I know you don't want to give it all away. Did he touch on this no income tax piece at all?
You know what, we did. Okay. And it was a question I didn't expect us to get to. But Chisley, you're right. That's something that a lot of people have been engaged with. It was Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones who kind of came out the gate with this big promise. He said, you elect me, I'll get rid of the state income tax. Different candidates have had different sort of postures on that. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, he engaged with it. You'll see his answer coming up this weekend. But I will say, too, it wasn't just income tax he was interested in. He's also interested in property taxes, lowering property taxes. He's a Republican. You can expect he's going to advocate for lowering taxes. The big question when we talk about all this, though, in Georgia, the legislature, every year, the one thing they must do under Georgia law is pass a balanced budget. So if you get rid of the income tax, if you lower whatever it is, you got to make that up somewhere else. And that is the conversation point that we're going to keep having, and you can expect these candidates to keep being forced to, even if they don't want to sometimes, engage with.
Everybody will be watching for that. All right, you got 30 seconds left. Tell us what else we're going to see on the Georgia vote this week.
Well, look, you can't have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters. We say it every week. We always end the show with the voice of the voter. It's so important in this complicated political moment to hear from and put regular folks, regular voters, in the center of the political conversation. We sat down with Bree Smith this week. She is they call her, she's an advocate for, a supporter of the Grayson football program. She's a mom of 2 athletes, and she has a lot of really interesting thoughts on the state of our politics right now. Plus, I guarantee you, if you watch it, she'll bring a smile to your face. She was such a pleasure to interview.
Hey, man, you bring a smile as well. We'll be watching.
Thank you,
so much.
Chesley.
Really appreciate it. All right, you can watch the Georgia Vote with Zach Merchant and Faith Jesse Sunday morning at 11 o'clock right here on 11 Live Plus. All right, right now, a new potential treatment for autism is generating a lot of attention. It's called leucovorin. I believe that's the way you say it. It's a form of a folinic acid already being used in cancer care, but new studies suggest it could improve communication and behavior in some children on the spectrum. The FDA recently took steps to expand the use, but experts caution the research is still in its early stages. Joining us now is Dr. Cecil Bennett. He's from the Noonan Family Medicine to help us sort this thing out and what it all means for us. Dr. Bennett, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so for people hearing about this, and I hope I'm saying it right, it's leucovorin, right?
Leucovorin, correct.
Leucovorin. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, we know that autism is a disease characterized by language delay. Folic acid is a vitamin that actually plays a role in the development of language in children. For some reason, children with autism cannot process and metabolize folic acid, and therefore they have language delay issues or language developmental issues. Leucovorin, or folinic acid, is a metabolite of folic acid. It's able to go across the blood-brain barrier to those language centers, and we've seen in 2 small studies that it actually has improved the language skills in children with autism. We should note, though, that this is an off-label use. As you mentioned, the drug was initially approved for use to treat side effects in patients taking chemotherapy. So this would be an off-label use of the drug.
So how is this different from the I mean, I think people take folic acid as a supplement, right? Is this one different than that?
This is the difference, is that children with autism, or at least some children, have issues in processing that folic acid. Folic acid needs to get into the brain or across the blood-brain barrier and get to those language centers. And in kids with autism, it cannot get across the membrane. But folinic acid, which is a derivative or metabolite of folic acid, actually can cross. So we're finding that folinic acid actually can improve language skills in children with autism.
So there are some studies showing some improvement. What do we know about those?
Well, here's the thing, all right? There have been 2 small-scale studies, the most being as many as 80 participants. It's been promising. Children have improved. The reason why we need a larger trial or phase 3 trial is that there's a lot more data that we need. With a trial with only 80 participants, we don't really know what's the correct dose. How high can we go? How high is toxicity? What ages do we start at? What weight do we start at? Does it last for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years? This is why long-term studies are necessary, but I can fully understand why the FDA moved forward to prove this drug off-label. Well, really it's not approving it off-label, but allowing it to be used off-label, because it is looking promising in children who have autism and language issues.
Of course, that's good news for folks who suffer from this, obviously, but you got to think about the side effects as well. Are there any side effects that we know about?
And that's the problem, right? We only have small studies with as many as 80 participants. A phase 3 trial will have as many as 800 participants. We'll have a bigger pool and we'll have a better idea of any type of toxicity. This is why larger trials are necessary. And I know parents get upset sometimes when drugs may seem to be promising and the FDA delays, but believe me, these large-scale trials provides a tremendous amount of information and can only keep our children safe if they're done correctly.
I was going to ask you that. You practice family medicine. Folks come run into your office. They hear about this new drug and this new treatment. They come to you and you say it, and you have to now kind of calm down. What do you say to them?
Again, I'm going to, in this case, because of the initial studies, for any of my children who do have autism, I would use it cautiously because of what I'm seeing in the science, but very cautiously. I really need to see bigger studies in order to be more comfortable in using the drug.
Well, we got 30 seconds left. Anything you want our viewers to know about this, I'm going to say, exciting new information?
This is something that we should know, that we should be careful if Big Pharma studies this drug, because if they study this drug and do the phase 3 trial and bring it to market, it's going to be a branded drug, and all of a sudden the cost may shoot up by 1,000-fold because they did the research. So it's very important that the CDC or the FDA or the NIH actually takes the lead in doing this research, that Big Pharma doesn't come along and all of a sudden this drug that was easily accessible becomes inaccessible to children who have autism.
Gotcha. Dr. Cecil Bennett, thanks so much for your insight today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks. More tariffs are on the way. What does it mean for you and I when it comes to our dollar? Well, CNN's Maribel Aber is going to talk all about it coming up. Stay right there. Welcome back to the show. More tariffs coming down the pipe. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in New York. Hello, Maribel. This could really threaten to reshape the cost of many of our everyday goods, huh?
Hey, good morning, Chesley. Indeed, President Trump has unveiled new tariffs on popular consumer items that will take effect October 1st. Kitchen and bathroom cabinets, upholstered furniture, and heavy trucks face levies between 25 and 50%. Now, Trump says the tariffs are needed to counter what he calls the quote, flooding of such imports into the country. Shares of Wayfair, Williams-Sonoma, and Restoration Hardware parent RH tumbled on the news. Trump is also planning a 100% tariff on pharmaceuticals if a drug maker is not producing in the U.S. or actively building a plant. Several companies have made billions in commitments, including one by Eli Lilly just this week. He posted on Truth Social, President Trump posted companies must be breaking ground or under construction. So Chesley, it's unclear if companies with only paper commitments will be spared the higher levies next week.
We'll have to wait and see. All right. I understand that NBC Universal is warning YouTube TV that it could lose some of its content there. What's that all about?
A dispute between YouTube TV and NBC Universal could lead to a blackout of your favorite programs. NBC Universal wants to charge more for programming, while YouTube TV is pushing back to avoid raising its price of $82.99 a month. And if agreement isn't reached, millions of viewers could lose access to NBC sports and entertainment content. This includes Sunday Night Football, The Voice, and other shows across Telemundo, USA, Bravo, and CNBC. YouTube TV says it's being charged more for the same content. NBC offers customers for less on Peacock. NBC Universal is now running messages on YouTube warning of the possible blackout. The deal deadline is October 1st. I mean, Chesley, don't mess with people Sunday night.
Not my football. No, you don't. Don't mess with it at all. Absolutely. Understand now that Amazon's getting ready to shell out billions over how people got signed up and got locked in with Prime.
In fact, $2.5 billion, to settle claims that Amazon tricked users into unwanted Prime memberships. The FTC says Amazon intentionally confused customers into signing up or renewing the service, then made it hard to cancel. Around 35 million customers will get refunds averaging $51 if they use the service less than 3 times. The settlement also includes a $1 billion civil penalty. Amazon denies any wrongdoing but agreed to change its practices and user interface. This includes adding clear buttons and prompts, Chesley, to ease the cancellation process.
All right. Finally, let's talk about Starbucks restructuring here. We're talking about a lot of layoffs and even stores closing up for good.
So, Chesley, Starbucks is laying off hundreds of workers and closing some stores as part of a $1 billion restructuring plan. Around 900 employees will be let go today, and several hundred open positions won't be filled. This is according to the company. Now, it wasn't clear how many cafes would close or their locations per se, but overall, the company shut about 1% of its stores in North America this year. CEO Brian Nichols says the cuts are key to the company's turnaround strategy. This is the second round of layoffs since he took over. Around 1,100 roles were cut earlier this year. Starbucks shares dipped 1% on the news Thursday, down 8% overall this year. You know, Chesley, Starbucks built its brand as that third place, you know, between work and home. So the challenge now is, can it cut jobs and still keep that experience and speed of getting drinks out the door happening?
Yeah.
You know?
Are you a coffee drinker, Maribel?
No coffee.
No, same here. But a lot of people.
We're the same.
Yeah, we are the same. It's a lot of same in a lot of areas. People are hooked on that stuff. So I don't know. I mean, there may be some unrest. We'll see. We will see.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Maribel. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
All right. Millions are living with arthritis every day. We're going to talk to a doctor about how to cope when we return. Stay right there. Rheumatic disease, including arthritis, remains one of Georgia's biggest health burdens, affecting millions, limiting daily life, and putting a strain on a short supply of specialists. Data from the Arthritis Foundation found that nearly 1 in 4 people in Georgia, that's roughly 2.6 million, are today living with arthritis. Nearly half of those affected say arthritis limits what they can do each day. By the year 2040, that number is projected to be soar even higher as Georgians' populations gets older and health demands continue to grow. Let's examine these numbers. Bring in Dr. Douglas White to talk all about this. So glad you are joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
All right, we said nearly 1 in 4 adults in Georgia reporting arthritis. How does that translate into what we're seeing on a day-to-day, what you're seeing day-to-day in your practice?
An increasing number of patients who are looking for subspecialty care in rheumatology. And of course, you combine that with the shortage in specialists, including rheumatologists that you already mentioned across the country and including here in Georgia. And it translates into long lines to get in to see a rheumatologist and long drives to get in to see a rheumatologist. Slows down access to care, and it's a problem that we've been battling for some time and are working very hard to solve.
What would you say is the biggest complaint that you hear from patients who suffer from this disease in their daily lives?
Well, so rheumatologists take care of these big systemic inflammatory disorders, right? So where the immune system that is normally protecting you from germs has now decided to cause inflammation for reasons we don't really understand in a number of organs around the body. But probably the most common site in the body where patients feel these conditions is in their joints. And so we become known as arthritis doctors. And for sure, some of the most prevalent diseases we take care of, like rheumatoid arthritis, predominantly affect the joints, in addition to other organs. But, you know, the patients usually at the beginning notice pain and stiffness, a lot of times in the hands and wrists and feet, sometimes knees and hips, all kinds of different joints all over the body. But in particular, in rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of times it starts in the hands and wrists. Seems to get better with heat, better with activity, and that's in contrast to some of the other wear and tear types of arthritis that get worse the more you use them. The rheumatoid arthritis patients feel better with movement. And a lot of times that's what they come into the clinic with. That alongside of significant amount of fatigue is another huge problem in these conditions. Patients walk around feeling like they have the flu all the time and they're exhausted.
Is this hereditary?
It is. It's not completely hereditary. We have pretty good data, at least in Caucasians. Most of this from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where the risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis sometime in your life it seems to be about 4-fold higher than the general population if your mom or your dad or your son or your daughter or a brother or a sister, in other words, a first-degree family member, also has rheumatoid arthritis. So there's clearly a familial component to it. There's a genetic component to it. But the current theory is that there has to be something in the environment to trigger it in a genetically susceptible individual. And so we think that the kind of the underpinnings of this revving up of the immune system, is there from a very early age, and then it starts to slowly develop over time, even before the patients have symptoms. And of course, we're trying to identify these patients as quickly as we can with testing and early referrals, because when we can intervene early, the treatments work so much better.
Doc, when you say trying to get it early, right? What are some of those signs that we should be looking for that maybe we think is the onset of this?
Well, I think anybody with arthritis symptoms in their hands and wrists needs to think about it a little bit, especially when there's swelling in the joints, stiffness, especially when there's a strong morning predominance to their symptoms. A lot of rheumatoid arthritis patients will describe how much better they feel with heat. That's another really interesting sign that really seems to distinguish rheumatoid arthritis and other types of inflammatory arthritis from the wear and tear arthritis. And so we like to have the opportunity to screen those patients with exams and a deeper history and some blood work and sometimes even some imaging to see whether or not we can find evidence of early arthritis before it's obvious, early rheumatoid arthritis especially. And then we can offer those patients therapy and sometimes abort the disease early in its course. And then when that happens, the patients have a far better outcome.
Yeah, you mentioned the environment, what's going on around you, maybe having some, some type of effect on that. And I even hear about people kind of leaving the north, right, to get out of the cold. You mentioned heat, right? Going down to the south. Does that tend to help?
Yeah, so patients with rheumatoid arthritis in particular, and other kinds of arthritis too, routinely talk about three things that seem to make their arthritis worse. One is stress, another is diet changes, and the third is weather. And so I previously practiced in Wisconsin, and we lost a lot of our patients to Texas and Florida as people got older with their arthritis and moved to southern states because they were more comfortable in the warmth.
Yeah. That has to do with weather, so I was going to ask you about that. Doc White, really appreciate you being with us today, and thanks for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, speaking of weather, we're going to have another look at your forecast, plus the weekend outlook, and we'll talk about my final take when we return. Stay right there. All right, at least the heat is gone and the rain is leaving us. There is a chance this afternoon for a isolated shower or thunderstorm to pop up. I'm thinking after about 1 or 2 o'clock you'll start to see that. It's a 30% chance, so not everyone gets wet. Even lower on Saturday, we'll be down to a 20% chance, so most of us will just see partly sunny skies. Temperatures remain in the low 80s, and that is where we should be for this time of year. Better of the 2 weekend days will be Sunday. You're looking at 84 degrees for the high temperature. And then as we head into next week, there's some uncertainty there. We're watching what could be the next tropical storm or hurricane that comes up along the United States, the east coast of the United States, and that could have impacts on our forecast. Could be here as soon as Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We'll be adding raindrops if that is the case, but it's something that we have to watch for. It's still way down there, closer to Dominican Republic right now, but that could have an impact on our forecast as we head into next week. Right now, I'm going to leave it dry and temperatures cooling off a bit, back down to the 70s by the time we get to Wednesday and Thursday. All right, it doesn't happen, but new words are being added to the Merriam-Webster Collegiate Dictionary. In fact, it's been over 20 years since new words have been added, but are they really new words? You know, the English language has been called limited because so many words have multiple meanings. So you be the judge. Over 5,000 new words are being added, like cold brew, beast mode, riz, dad bod, hard pass. All words already existing in the book, but you add a new word to it, it gives it a new meaning, right? Sounds more like a slang dictionary to me, but I get it, no secret. You know, reference books for adults have been on the decline, so clearly Merriam-Webster is trying to do its best to hang on to the nostalgia of books and try to reach younger people, right? At least for now, they are the leader in online word searches, so they can hang their hat on that. I mean, can you imagine what sentence they'll use for Riz and the meaning of it? We'll see. They're being added, folks. You be the judge. That's all we got for you today. Make it a great day and a great weekend. Try to encourage someone today as well with a new word.